Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it is episode 63, where we are talking Death of a Unicorn, A24's latest release in theaters, star-studded cast. Before we get to that, though, I hope you are all doing well. What a week it has been, my dear God. And we have tons of news to cover before we even get to the review. Some major news to cover. Before we get to the news, however, this week I released my March YouTube video, which was ranking the MCU franchises. So we had 10 of the franchises within the MCU, talked about each of the installments and all of the different franchises. So it was a lot of fun. I liked it a lot, and I actually figured out a way that I can get my podcast microphone to connect to my iPhone now with a camera adapter. So in the next video, my audio is going to be even better with a proper microphone instead of one of the crappy little like $50 ones. But that one has served me well, and it's a great starting point if anyone's looking for a microphone to get started. So go check it out, my video on my YouTube channel. If you're listening on the streamers, you can find a link to my YouTube channel below. If you're on my YouTube channel, it's on the channel right now. Check it out. Very much looking forward to making another fun video next month. Also, timestamps below. Of course, we have a non-spoiler and spoiler section in the review for Death of a Unicorn, so I start with non-spoilers. So without further ado, let's jump into the news. All right, well, the first piece of news comes from Ben Affleck, who I guess is kind of on his press tour for The Accountant 2. I've never seen the first one, but they played the trailer when I was at the movies last night for the second one, and it looks damn good. So my mission this weekend might be to watch The Accountant. I'll definitely watch the first one before I see the second one. Of course, we'll probably do a review episode on it. I think it's out April 25th or something like that. But he was talking about his experience being Batman and the whole ordeal with Zack Snyder, the DCEU. It was a very tough time for him personally, if you don't know. So I just want to read his quote and what he talked about for a bit. He said there was sort of a misalignment of agendas between the studio, the filmmakers, and what he sort of wanted to get out of it. So he said what happened was it started to skew too old for a big part of the audience. Even my own son at the time was too scared to watch the movie. Affleck said, adding that personally supported the shift to showing Batman as a, quote, sort of older, broken, damaged Bruce Wayne instead. When I saw that, I was like, oh shit, we have a problem. Then I think that's when you had a filmmaker that wanted to continue down that road and a studio that wanted to recapture all the younger audiences at cross purposes. There you have two entities, two people really wanting to do something different, and that is a really bad recipe. He then continued saying there are a number of reasons why that was a really excruciating experience, and they don't all have to do with the simple dynamic of, say, being in a superhero movie or whatever. I am not interested in going down that particular genre again, not because of the bad experience, but just I've lost interest in what was of interest about it to me. But I certainly wouldn't want to replicate an experience like that. A lot of it was misalignment of agendas, understandings, and expectations. But he also took some personal responsibility and said, quote, he wasn't bringing anything particularly wonderful to DC films at the time. So yeah, if you don't know, he was going through a tough time. He struggled with sobriety, of course. He's been divorced multiple times, and he's gone through a lot of personal issues. And while filming all of the Zack Snyder Batman movies or the Joss Whedon Justice League, a lot of those issues were coming back. So he was having issues and has been quoted saying he brought a lot of that to set at the time. And like in the press tour for Batman v Superman, like, look, you can hate those movies, you can love those movies. I don't know, all the Snyder cult fan guys online, but also everyone that's not a fan of the Snyder fans needs to acknowledge this was a rough time for him, and that is why he would never come back. Like all this, oh, release the Snyder cut or restore the Snyderverse or whatever. You can do that, but you're never going to get Ben Affleck back as Batman because he has made it abundantly clear he is done with that chapter in his life. And I really respect his openness about it, just saying that like it was a tough time for me, my own son didn't want to watch them, and that's what motivated him. And what interested him about the role was, oh cool, I can be a superhero and my kids can look up for me. I feel like any parent that is stepping into a superhero genre or an action hero genre or whatever the genre is where it's, you know, kids can watch this movie, of course they are doing it for their kids. Like I bet you a bunch of the MCU actors who have kids, you know, that are old enough and watch the movies, as soon as they found out, oh, my dad or my mom might be one of those heroes, the parent immediately was like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot because then, you know, I have something to bond over my kid with. And I feel really bad for Ben Affleck. You know, like sobriety and recovering from addiction issues it can be a very lonely experience. It's just, I think I have a lot of respect for Ben Affleck just being so open about his journey with not only sobriety, but just his relationship with the Batman role. And, you know, being Batman it's a big deal. It's like James Bond. It's like Superman. It's like, it's one of those tentpole characters that the day you're announced, the internet, everyone is going to weigh in. Even people who aren't, necessarily a fan of that particular hero will probably have an opinion about it. It sounds really sad that he joined onto the process being really excited about this take, and then all of a sudden he probably felt like the rug was pulled out from under him a little bit, with his son not being interested and too scared to watch, but also the studio being like, yeah, we want to go in another direction with this. And of course he was supposed to have his own solo movie, but I think mentally he was probably already on the way out, or not. He was slowly losing interest over the years, and once they said, oh, we're going to bring in Matt Reeves, I think he was very clearly like, you know what, I think my time is done. And I don't know, he was never rude about it or snobby or made public comments that are like, oh, I was pushed out as Batman. I think he was very ready to move on from that role. So I don't know, I wish Ben Affleck all the best. It's not fun to see anyone struggle, and people that, are in the public spotlight, it's so, that's a rare thing that I sort of have empathy with celebrities about. Usually I don't have a lot of empathy with celebrities, but being a celebrity and struggling with addiction issues in public is a very weird thing, because, the biggest thing in my life I will deal with in private because I'm not famous or a public person, but like, you have to every day put a mask on or whatever. And I think in the Batman versus Superman press run, you could really tell something was up, and he just seemed very not happy with what was happening. But let's move into another story talking about Amazon MGM. So Jen Psaki, the head of Amazon MGM, is out and will transition to just producing. Film and TV heads Courtney Valenti and Vernon Sanders will now directly report to Amazon Prime head Mike Hopkins, who has decided to eliminate Psaki's position. So she gave the green light on Amazon's $500 million The Lord of the Rings of Power, which sort of didn't do very well, and the Russo brothers' $300 million Citadel show, which absolutely flopped so hard, and was responsible for the $100 million partnership deal with Phoebe Waller-Bridge, which has so far been the scam of the century because 0 shows have been produced with that money. Kind of mind-boggling, and what might have actually been the nail in the coffin, so to speak, was the James Bond debacle. So Psaki's exit occurred right as Amazon's $1 billion James Bond deal was being finalized. And World of Real, who is sometimes reliable, said, this is Hopkins/Bezos making sure that Psaki doesn't go anywhere near 007. There's too much at stake, too much to lose, and Psaki is already fucked up enough. Now, who will be in charge of the Bond franchise? Amy Pascal and David Heyman have closed deals to produce the next James Bond movie for Amazon MGM. So the producers are behind the Spider-Man movies and the Harry Potter franchises. Amy Pascal, of course, famously has done all of the Sony Spider-Man stuff, whether it's the great stuff like Spider-Verse or awful stuff like Madam Web, Morbius, Craven, all of that stuff. So Hollywood Reporter says it's official. The James Bond franchise has found its producers in Amy Pascal and David Heyman. The duo have been tapped by Amazon MGM to steer the new Bond film, the first to be produced by someone outside the Broccoli family. That's wild. It's kind of like a new era for this franchise, and I'm so worried that we're very quickly going to turn it into a billion spin-offs. And there was that rumor that they were going to make a follow-up show after No Time to Die, where, spoilers, James Bond dies. They were going to do a follow-up show with just the team, but nothing ever came of that. And I think that's probably a good choice, because I don't really care to watch a James Bond thing without James Bond. So Amazon MGM highlighted both Pascal and Heyman's track record in franchise filmmaking. Pascal is behind the Spider-Man franchise, with the Tom Holland-fronted films grossing over $3 billion at the global box office, while Heyman shepherded the Harry Potter franchise, including the spin-off series Fantastic Beasts, to commercialize. I wouldn't be bragging about Fantastic Beasts, but still, I mean, Spider-Man, of course, is a huge franchise. Even The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 did okay, but all 3 Tobey Maguire films, good. All 3 Tom Holland films, insane. Like, $3 billion is nuts. So, quote, James Bond is one of the most iconic characters in the history of cinema, said Pascal and Heyman in a joint statement. We are humbled to follow in the footsteps of Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, who made so many extraordinary films, and honored and excited to keep the spirit of Bond very much alive as he embarks on his next adventure. Interesting, they're saying his, and he embarks on his next adventure, so clearly, it's still going to be a dude. All right, I'm good with that. I think the only line I have with, like, who should be cast in Bond is kind of, I don't know, is it degrading to just be like, oh, well, we'll let them gender swap and be like a Jane Bond? Who was it? Gillian Anderson? I think I was reading an interview with Gillian Anderson, because she was, a couple of years back, they were like, oh, they're making Jane Bond, and Gillian Gillian Anderson is in the running, and she's like, I don't want to be a female James Bond. I'd rather we write an original character that's entertaining for, a woman to play. Like, I think the John Wick franchise is oddly enough going in a good direction with like a John Wick spinoff, the Ballerina, where you're creating an original woman character and not just being like, oh, it's Jane Wick and it's his sister. It's like, no, it's cool that they're just doing a female-led franchise within that universe. We don't need a Jane Bond. We can have tons of interesting female characters like Furiosa, That's a great fucking lead for a movie, and it's just, I would watch 10 Furiosa movies. I don't need Mad Michelle instead of Mad Max. I don't know. I would love to hear what other people think, like, of a gender-swapped James Bond. Would that be interesting? I have no issues with, like, a race swapping at all. Oh my god. Actually, one actor I think would do a great job is probably Dev Patel. I think watching Monkey Man last year, he's suave as hell. He's handsome. He can do the spy stuff and the action super well. I think Dev Patel would actually be a very good Bond, and he's young. He can get, shredded and be a very... Although, I don't think Bond actually has to be that shredded. He's supposed to kind of look like a government agent, but he can be fit, So there you go. That's my casting for James Bond. I'm going Dev Patel. I think that would actually be a really fun one. But let's move into another story before the last one I'm really excited to get to. Zoinks, says USA Today. Netflix is releasing a live-action Scooby-Doo series. So Netflix will be doing an 8-episode live-action Scooby-Doo revival. Look, I'm a huge Scooby-Doo head. When I was a kid, I watched so much Scooby-Doo. I freaking loved it. The 2 live-action ones, I watched those over and over and over again on VHS and then on DVD when we got them on DVD. They're so much fun. Having said that, a live-action Netflix Scooby-Doo series, I'm not very excited about that. I don't know. I think it's going to be very explain everything to you, and they're going to treat the audience stupid, or treat them dumb, act like they're dumb. And I think one thing I like about everything Scooby-Doo is it's just fun, and it doesn't try to talk down to kids that are watching it and hold their hand. It's a mystery that kids can consume and understand, and that's what I like about it. But I don't think Netflix is going to do that because they feel the need to explain absolutely everything about a story to the audience member of, wow, that was that one guy I saw earlier, and they have to do the second screen explaining, which it's I can't hate on people that like to just watch streaming shows that explain everything to you, because society has just fried our brain beyond belief, and we have been all programmed to consume as many things at once as possible, like have 4 screens open and have one thing on in the background, one thing we're listening to and scrolling something. So I can't really complain. Now, there is minimal details coming out about the series, but according to USA Today, the series is being spearheaded by Midnight Radio, a Los Angeles-based production company led by Josh Applebaum and Scott Rosenberg. Midnight Radio recently worked on the live-action remake of Cowboy Bebop. Oh no, for Netflix. Oh, that show got shit on. And then the series High Fidelity for Hulu, which actually everyone loved, and the drama series Everything Sucks for Netflix. I've never heard of that, but I know High Fidelity, that's with Zoe Kravitz, and I think a lot of people really like that. Cowboy Bebop was not good as far as I remember. I only remember seeing terrible things about it. So that's a bit of a mixed bag, but it would be fun to have Matthew Lillard come back as a villain of some kind, or Freddie Prinze Jr., any of the cast really, just like have them come back in some capacity, not as the gang, but as like the villains or just side characters would be really cool. But okay, that's all I wanted to say about that. I have nothing else to say because we're going to get into the main event of the news today, which is the Avengers Doomsday cast. We're going to talk about it. I made a video on my social media. Of course, the day I dropped my YouTube video ranking the MCU franchises, another huge MCU story comes in and kind of like overshadows it. Like if you look up MCU, my video is not going to pop up in everything because it's just going to be MCU Doomsday, Avengers Doomsday. It's not going to be ranking the MCU franchises, or it was a good thing. I can't tell yet. But anyways, I also made a social media video just like quickly getting some thoughts out, but let's talk about it here because I still have a bit more that I want to say. So there was like an 8-hour live stream. I thought they were just going to put out a list, and I turned on the live stream. It just kept going, and it was a chair with Chris Hemsworth for 15 minutes, and I was like, what the hell are they doing? And then they put another chair, and I immediately knew what was happening. I was like, oh no, they're going to announce the cast. And so I googled how many cast members are there rumored to be in Avengers Doomsday, and almost every site said 50, and I was like, oh Jesus Christ. So while I was doing job applications, I just had my phone on the live stream on Instagram, and it was painful. Was it a good reveal? No. Did it work? Yes, because the only thing I saw on my social media that day, Avengers Doomsday cast, everything was talking about the Avengers Doomsday cast. Even if you hate the MCU, you love it, every social media page or every social media feed I have somehow had the MCU in like every second post. So I was like, God damn it, well, they've done it again. And for a washed up franchise that has been putting out mostly duds recently, they still very much have people's attention because people are just curious what they're going to do. So let's go through the cast here. We have Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Anthony Mackie as Captain America, Vanessa Kirby as Susan Storm, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, Florence Pugh as Yelena, Tina Huerta as Namor, Simu Liu finally coming back as Shang-Chi, Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, Letitia Wright as Black Panther, Eben Moss-Backrack as The Thing, Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Louis Pullman as Sentry, Danny Ramirez as Joaquin Torres, Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, David Harbour as Red Guardian, Winston Duke as M'Baku, Hannah John Kamen as Ghost, Tom Hiddleston, it's Hiddleston deadline. Tom Hiddleston is coming back as Loki, which is very surprising. Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, Professor X, dear God. Ian McKellen as Magneto, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, James Marsden as Cyclops, and Channing Tatum as Gambit. Whoo, I'm about to make a name for myself. As well as Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic was also confirmed to be joining, and Robert Downey Jr., of course, as Doom. Called him Doomsday in my social media video, and when I was editing, I was like, you idiot. But here we go. What a cast it is. I am so confused what their plans are. Just feels like they don't actually care about developing great characters and team dynamics. It's all just pointing at things from the past and being like, hey guys, remember 2000s Fox X-Men, which not even a full year ago we had this emotional send-off for that universe. And it's funny that Hugh Jackman's not even here. Like, I thought if they're gonna bring back anyone from the X-Men, it's gonna be Channing Tatum and Hugh Jackman. He's not even announced. Now, there are a lot of names missing here, and it's already been confirmed by pretty much Robert Downey Jr. and Marvel Studios themselves that there's going to be plenty more cast members. That's terrifying. I think Disney and Marvel Studios with No Way Home and, Deadpool and Wolverine, even Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness to an extent, have really, all they are is just wow looking and pointing moments. It's no like amazing superhero moments and character moments that feel like a really cool payoff of like, oh cool, we're finally seeing that in this movie because it feels so earned. Like, one thing I will always go back, and I hate Joss Whedon so much, but the original Avengers movie, which I just talked about in my video, is so phenomenal. Not just because it was like there was a newness to it of like, oh wow, we've never seen this before. What was so great about it is the development of the team throughout the movie. Everyone gets their moment to shine. It's a small and like intimate team of 6 people, and I was really hoping Doomsday, maybe we can just focus on a team of 10 maximum. I don't need any more than that, but we already have 27 cast members. It's going to be a mess, and it's a year away. Like, this is coming out May of next year, and it's only just started filming. Visual effects, they could have 3 years and the visual effects would probably still look terrible, but this movie is also going to cost so much money. The cast money alone is probably forcing the CGI budget to be a shoestring. Like, Kevin Feige is going to be even more bald by the end of this. So, I don't know. My excitement for these movies before was at like a 6 or 7, and after the cast list came out, it took a bit of a hit, and it really sucks because I've loved the MCU since the start, and it's just been like this slow acceptance since Endgame that like, oh man, we're never gonna have this quality in storytelling again. So Spider-Man's missing, Doctor Strange is missing, apparently Chris Evans is coming back. I kind of hope he doesn't. Like, dude, don't stoop to that. You already did Johnny Storm again. You don't need to come back. It's fine. But he's probably going to. He's a great actor. Go do other stuff. Go do The Materialists with Celine Song and go find other interesting artists to work with. But that's going to do it for the news. Let me know what you thought of the Avengers cast news. But I think we should talk about our movie this week. Again, timestamps below. If you want to skip the spoiler section, you can just start with the non-spoiler section, then move into what else I watch, where we have plenty of stuff to talk about there. But let's get into Death of a Unicorn. All right, Death of a Unicorn is a 2025 horror comedy coming in at 1 hour and 48 minutes. Currently has 56% on Rotten Tomatoes with 6.2 on IMDb, 3.1 on Letterboxd with a 3 squeaking in as the mode average or the mode rating. So classified as mixed reviews, I think it's fair to say. Directed by Alex Sharfman. He has no other director credits on Letterboxd or IMDb, only short directorials. So this is his directorial debut as well as his his writing debut. It's his first movie that he's written. Budget, couldn't find anything about the budget online, but I would wager a guess the budget was very low, and most of the budget goes into some CGI unicorns because it's filmed in one location, very minimal set dressing, just a bunch of PPE and stuff. So, I can't imagine it was a crazy high budget. Google's in a nutshell has it as thrilling, gripping, and suspenseful. The synopsis for the film is: when a man and his daughter accidentally hit and kill a unicorn with their car, his boss tries to exploit the creature's miraculous curative properties with horrific results. The film stars Paul Rudd as Elliot, Jenna Ortega as Ridley, Will Poulter as Shepard, Richard E. Grant as Odell, Taya Leone as Belinda, Sunita Mani as Dr. Bhatia, Steve Park, who was just in Mickey 17, as Dr. Song, Anthony Carrigan as Griff. I absolutely love Anthony Carrigan. Barry is one of my favorite shows ever. And Jessica Hines as Shaw. So a very great cast. Let's get into my initial thoughts on Death of a Unicorn. I wasn't anticipating this movie a crazy amount. I had seen mixed reviews from South by Southwest where it debuted, I believe. So I was cautiously optimistic going into it, but having watched it, I have to say, woof, that was rough, guys. I'm very sad to report this was not very good for me. I could see why people would love it. And look, I actually literally, like I said to one of my mutuals on Twitter last night, Alejandro, I feel like I'm a very easy laugh when I watch comedies. I just really like comedies. Last year there was that stupid movie Ricky Stinicky or whatever, and I love that. It was dumb. It made no sense, but I'm an easy laugh with an easy concept. This was a tough one, and let's get into the performances. Jenna Ortega as Ridley. She's only very briefly, and it's towards the end of the movie, no spoilers, where she's actually interesting and fun, and I feel something for her and I want her to succeed. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm just tired of every role Jenna Ortega has is of this, quiet, sort of reserved and kind of rude and snarky teenager sometimes. She's 22 years old, but she's playing, I would say, an 18-year-old in this, and that's not a stretch by any means. I mean, Tom Holland, just played a high schooler and he's 26 or whatever, so I have no issues with that, but it just feels like she's being very limited in some of the roles she's picking, it's, Beetlejuice, Wednesday, or even in the Scream movies. I actually really like her in the Scream movies, or I liked her in the Scream movies because she's not in them anymore. I liked that she sort of gets to be a fun teenager, and you get to see a fun personality from her, but it feels like every other movie I'm watching her in, she's doing the same role, and that's very much what's going on here. I think maybe she's the only heartbeat that this movie has, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like anything new. And as for Paul Rudd, a person I love very much, I love Paul Rudd. I think he's a great actor, and actually they showed the trailer for Friendship before this with him and Tim Robinson. I think that movie looks hilarious, and my theater had a lot of laughter from that trailer, except one doofus behind me who was like, what the fuck, that looks so weird, and I actually had to move because him and his girlfriend were talking so loud, and he was like this country, what the fuck is going on, you don't want her or anything? And I was like, all right, well, I'm out of here. So I moved to the front of the theater, and whatever, it was fine. I can't control other people's actions, but Paul Rudd in this movie, that was a roundabout way to get to this. I don't think Paul Rudd's very good in this. He has a somewhat interesting character and a very flawed, complex guy that he's playing, but it feels so inauthentic, and it feels like there's a lot of, I don't know, acting shining through. It doesn't ever feel like he's actually inhibiting the role. It just feels like he's very much putting it on. The whole thing is very much a put on. This all feels like a short or a commercial. None of it actually has heart to it that I'm like, oh, I'm buying into who these people are. Having said that, Will Poulter, who I think is the absolute highlight of this movie, he is the number one person. He is the funniest. Every good moment I enjoyed sort of came from Will Poulter. He plays Shepard, the son of these rich people that are hosting Elliot and Ridley for the weekend to sign this deal or whatever it is to take care of the land as their lawyer, like a conservationist lawyer, I think is what Elliot is. And it's barely important because the unicorn stuff takes over very quickly. But the Leopold family in general, with Will Poulter, Richard E. Grant, and Taya Leone, mixed bag, because Will Poulter, and actually Alejandro, who I was talking to on Twitter, also said this, Will Poulter feels like he's in a completely different movie here. He is acting his socks off. He's being hilarious. There were moments where he reminded me of, what's his character in We Are the Millers? There's one moment in the movie where he's having a freak out, and he just pretty much was that character again, and I was like, oh man, Will Poulter is hilarious. I always forget how funny he is, and he used to be Eyebrows Kid, but now he is a full-on, good dramatic actor, and I loved him in this, but Richard E. Grant and Tia Leone are just not very interesting in comparison to him. Even Will Poulter's character, everyone is just pretty much much skin deep. There's no real complexities to a lot of the characters in this. Like even Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega, who play the characters in our movies who have the most character arc or the biggest character arc or any character arc, to be honest, it's all very basic and it's kind of disappointing. Same with Anthony Carrigan as Griff. I love him. He plays NoHo, Hank, and Barry. He's playing Metamorpho in the new Superman movie. It feels like there's so much that could have been done with his character, but it's just not done. And it's a shame because this movie, one of the reasons I did want to see it was I was like, oh, this cast is very impressive. Tia Leone was in this movie I loved as a kid called Fun with Dick and Jane with her and Jim Carrey. I remember watching it on TV all the time. So funny. It's about this couple like losing money or they're broke or something like that and they're gonna lose their house and they're just finding cheap ways to live. I haven't watched it in years, but I remember it being so funny as a child, and she has a couple of moments in this where I'm like, okay, that's okay, but most of the time it feels like the cast is really just all doing their own thing. And the story itself, it's a very fun and inventive story. What if a group of people found a unicorn after they thought they had killed it, and it's one of the most mystical and magical animals? What would they do if they found out it can heal any ailment? Like the trailer shows, it comes back to life, it cures his cancer, cures Jenna Ortega's acne in the movie and Paul Rudd's vision because he only has glasses at the start of the movie. Clearly the unicorns have healing powers, so it's all about how would a group of rich people respond to finding out they've found the cure for everything, like cancer. As Will Poulter's character Shepard says, that's the biggest one, which is actually a great joke. But it's just, what would we do with that if we found out that happened? And this story says, well, nothing that would surprise you, really. There were no twists and turns in this that I was like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. Just every step of the way it was kind of, all right, now we got to do that thing, and okay, now we need to see someone die, and just like over and over. And the trailer really does give a lot away. Like I was like, oh, there's not a lot of surprises in this, really. Maybe the only storyline is like that I was surprised by was the dead mom storyline, which I'll talk about in a bit. But like, I don't know, this movie very sloppy and very tired and just not that interesting. And I think it's a movie that doesn't feel interested in what it's talking about either. Like the directing, Alex Sharfman, pardon me, it's his directorial debut, but it feels like he's a longtime director phoning it in for a paycheck and doing like one for them, one for me type thing. It doesn't feel like he is really passionate about the project, and it doesn't feel like the movie feels quite loose and uninspired. There's nothing really steering everyone in one unified direction. Like like Will Poulter, he feels like he's acting in a different movie, and like it feels like Will Poulter is in a different movie because it's just tonally all over the place, this movie. And I think another issue with the script itself, and Alex Sharfman also wrote the script, it's so repetitive. Like I felt like we were living through a lot of the same moments or funny scenarios over and over again. Like I was kind of getting confused. Didn't we already do this? I thought we've already discovered this and we're talking about it. It's not like, oh, it's the rule of threes in comedies. It's like we do everything multiple times, and it's not even just funny setups to be like, oh, ha ha ha, it's funnier and funnier every time it happens. It's like we've already seen this. It's not very interesting. Let's move it along. And especially the dynamics and character moments feel like they're happening over and over again. It's a lot more of the same dynamic playing over and over between Ridley, Elliot, Shepard. Like Shepard says something snarky about Ridley and she's all, oh, well, I'm an art history major. And it's just like, man, art history majors get a bad rep. And like this movie kind of proves that. But at the same time, the movie's not painting her lightly in a lot of ways for most of the runtime. And Shepard and everyone's just constantly roasting her about being an art history major. And I'm a history major. That's rude. But let's get into a couple of the technical things, like the unicorns, visuals, and the CGI. I think in the trailer you see a little bit of the unicorns, but there's moments where I actually found this movie visually interesting. Otherwise, it's a very bland and boring looking film. I think the unicorns are very fun in some parts, like looking like these insane creatures and beasts. In daytime, when you see the unicorns, not good. I think the baby unicorn they hit with the car looks really good because it looks like an on-set puppet. Some of the choices they make visually are interesting, but also when you touch the unicorn horns, you get a vision and you like see this like really cosmic type thing that I liked. I think that was really cool, having the unicorn horn vision. That was fun, and like Ridley does it at the start of the movie, and that's kind of a setup for the rest of our story that she's connected to these unicorns. And I think it's fascinating in that way, but at the same time, the CGI, especially with some of the kills and like the gory stuff, I was like, Another technical aspect, the editing and pacing of this film. It's a movie that felt very long, and I think that comes from the repetition in the script. Like it's an hour and 47 minutes, but it felt very long in comparison. I thought this was like 2-hour, 20-minute movie, because it was like, we've already done this moment. We've already had them, try to discover the unicorn lore, and then someone get cut off and they say, oh, enough of that. And it's like, we're just living the same moment over and over and over again. And I realized about 2/3 of the way through this movie that I don't really like anyone. There's nothing redeemable about any of them, or maybe Ridley. I would say, yeah, I'll stick up for Ridley and Jenna Ortega. I think she's the only one in this movie that I was like, you know what? If she survived, that's fine with me. But everyone else, I was like, I don't really care, no matter what. And that was all the way to the end, really. I mean, until the last moments, until curtains, I think Ridley was the only one I was like, it'd be nice if she made it out alive, but I'm not that attached to the idea if the unicorns just ripped through this entire cast. There's not a lot of moments that made me buy into, oh, these are good people, even if they make some strange choices. I think also that just goes with, I want to talk about Elliot specifically, Paul Rudd's character. Like, he's a complicated father because Ridley lost her mom / Elliot's wife, of course. They lost her to cancer a few years ago, and then she went off to college, like, right after it happened, pretty much. So there hasn't really been a grieving period, and their relationship is a little bit, strayed when they get to the cabin for the weekend, or the mansion, I should say. It's not a cabin, it's a mansion. It's literally an oligarch's mansion, but it's just very much like scene to scene. I felt like Paul Rudd's character was flipping in motivations and intentions, and I think that's a lot of the script issues with this, is there's repetitive moments, but also there's no webbing between the scenes, and there's no character webbing, or like it doesn't all mesh together is what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I chose webbing as a word. And specifically with Elliot, I think that sticks out the most. A lot of his character moments I didn't really understand. Like, it's clear he loves his daughter, but sometimes he does things that I'm like, no loving father would do that. And I sort of touched on it briefly before, that this is a comedy, and oh boy, my audience was not having it. There was minimal laughing in my auditorium, and it was like decently full. I was sitting near the front, and there were like 4 people in front of me in a row of 8. There were 2 people behind me, 1 person in my row, and then a bunch of people at the front, and there was not a lot of laughter, and I thought it was going to be a lot of laughing. I was like, okay, the trailer looked pretty funny, but oh man, jokes were not landing, and I was like, this is rough. I'm trying to remember the last time I watched a comedy and it didn't land as badly as it's not landing today, and it's been a while. It was tough to get through. Will Poulter was the only one, like I said before, really getting laughs out of people, and it's a satire, so maybe it's just hard to make satires now because life is just so like ridiculous around us that maybe it's hard to make satires of the things that are happening, because it's like, oh well, that's not far-fetched that it's hilarious. Now that could all just be reality. But let's talk about the themes of the movie a little bit more, and then I just want to touch on the violence and gore towards the end. I think there's some interesting themes here, and it really only goes skin deep. Like I said before, there's what science cannot explain in life. Look, I'm not a religious person, and maybe there are things in this world that like science just hasn't been able to explain. And it's interesting in this movie, they talk about the unicorns' healing powers and like reproducing their blood for manufacturing and monetization. But like, there's things that you just can't study and explain no matter how hard you study them. And that was one theme I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I see what they're doing. I enjoyed that. Also, of course, grief, because Ridley loses her mom, Elliot loses their wife. Grief is a major theme throughout this film. I would say grief is probably the most developed theme in this film, and that's why it wasn't a 1-star movie to me, is because I was like, okay, at least they're doing some interesting stuff in what would you do if your very young daughter lost her mother and then immediately went to college and is coming back and you promised to provide for her, Then there's like, it's a classic eat the rich and greed story, like a Knives Out, Glass Onion, Get Out, Opus, all of the eat the rich movies. It doesn't really go into the complexities of the rich people as well. Like, I'm not saying, oh, well, I want to be sympathetic for the billionaires, but like, show me that they were humans maybe at one point and they were corrupted by power, because I don't think people are inherently bad. I think greed corrupts people, and fame and richness, corrupts people. So maybe you can do something with that. One thing I did really like about the movie, though, is the monetization of like miracles, or, if we did find a cure for cancer or for blindness, and it's not, LASIK or chemotherapy, like just a straight up cure where you inject someone with unicorn blood and all of a sudden they don't have cancer, or they can see perfect, they have 20/20 vision. Would it be made free? Would it be widely available as soon as possible? And they talk about the monetization of it and like distributing it to only like, oh, quote unquote good people, or a very few good people, because they can't reproduce it. And then obviously wealth distribution with the medical assistance. And I don't know, I always think of back to COVID when they developed the vaccines and they were ready for humans to use. How did we roll out vaccines throughout the world, and who was like higher priority? What part of the world are we getting doing it to, and how the rollout of all the vaccines started. I always think about that. So those are the major themes of the movie, but they all feel very undeveloped by the end of it. I would say the grief one is the most developed in the story, and that was really the heartbeat of this movie. But otherwise, it's pretty like, I don't know, nothing interesting to say, and it doesn't feel like Alex Sharfman has anything interesting to say in this movie. The violence and gore of the unicorns, like, it is a horror movie, but I don't know, it almost feels like a distraction trying to hide a mediocre story, and all of the violence in the movie was a little bit weightless to me. It's the same thing every single time someone gets stabbed through the chest by the unicorn horn, and it's in the trailer, and they just do that over and over again. So again, repetitive. And the unicorn lore, I guess that's the last thing, I want to talk about, is there's so much fascinating stuff because Ridley, you know, she's connected to the unicorns, so she does all this background research, and it's so fascinating, like the unicorn lore, but it feels like every time it's just starting to get interested in the unicorn lore, someone cuts her off and they move on to something else, and it's like, no, shut up. I want to hear about the unicorns. Unicorns are kind of dope. They're kind of cool creatures, and they're like mystical and magical, and it's fun, and I want to hear all that. But look, overall, I think the third act really struggles, or it's like starts to get good and then it doesn't know how to end the movie, and the ending was absolutely baffling to me. The emotions, I think there's just a lack of sincerity with this movie, and it tries to be emotionally engaging, but it feels inauthentic by the time we get to the end of the movie. And there's a moment at the start of the movie where you can tell Elliot and Ridley could be a very good father-daughter duo. I don't know, a lot of the issues I have with this movie are the same issues I had with Opus, another A24 film that just came out like 2 weeks ago. An interesting lead that I find fascinating. I think Jenna Ortega is a fantastic actress. I think Io Debris is a fantastic actress. Talented cast. Satire about the rich and powerful. What happens when there's a normal person there to observe and call out the ridiculous stuff. But the issue is they both sort of refuse to dive in deeper into their themes and just present a surface level movie. Like, oh yeah, you guys get what we're talking about. Eat the rich, celebrity worship's bad, parasocial relationships bad, monetization of miracles bad, but nothing really fun done with those themes and nothing inventive to present. So this was not very good. I wish I could say at least it's funny, even if it's not willing to go into the themes, at least it's really funny. But a lot of the jokes just really didn't land for me and feel very forced or like tired and thrown in at the last minute of like, I don't really want to do a horror movie. I'll just make it a comedy so people can excuse the boring horror. But even if you want to rehash some unoriginal ideas, at least make it entertaining. And this movie was not entertaining. So I'm sad to say Death of a Unicorn is 2 out of 5 stars. Let's get into spoilers. All right, spoilers for Death of a Unicorn. Look, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but I definitely wouldn't rewatch it anytime soon. But let's get into spoilers. This isn't really a spoiler, but movie set in Canada. That's cool to see. We see the RCMP. We see a fake Air Canada type logo. That was cool. It's fun to see it's in Canada. But the moment where, and I thought this was another plot element that wasn't really developed, is the moment where Odell's cancer is cured. The wife seemed so bummed out and kept saying like, oh, well, we better make sure, and seemed like she was ready for him to die so she could just take in all of his assets. And I thought that would maybe be a theme that was a little more developed of like, she does seem much younger than him. I don't know how much younger, but she seems a lot younger than him. Maybe she's just waiting on the day that he's going to bite the dust so her and her son, or their son, can take over everything, and they're rich. So I don't know, it was kind of funny when he was like on his deathbed, she didn't seem that bummed. And then when he's like, oh, I feel more alive than ever, like you see in the trailer, you can see she's kind of let down. Okay, another point I want to talk about a little bit more in detail now that I can sort of reveal the whole thing. Ridley's mom / Elliot's wife. So she died of cancer, and he promised her, and this is a big point in the story, like he promised her, I said I would take care of you no matter what, Ridley, and I would do whatever I had to do so you wouldn't have to live a stressed life. You know, I would provide for you or whatever. So that's why he's in this whole thing, like being their litigation lawyer or liaison or whatever it is, a corporate lawyer, I feel like he is. And that makes sense. I thought that was actually a touching moment. She doesn't understand, like, why are you being like this? And he even steals the baby unicorn's horn so he can sell it and provide for them and make some money, because the doctor's like, oh, we got to take care of our own or whatever. And that's why she gets killed, because she steals the little powdered thing, or the unicorn horn powder. So I like that moment, like, and that sort of goes into maybe in non-spoilers, I couldn't get into it, so that's why I couldn't explain why Elliot's character is interesting. He's clearly a complicated and complex guy. He really loves his daughter, and he's willing to do whatever he has to do. And it seems like he's a bad person listen at times. If people steal food because their family is starving, are they really a criminal? Or, the morality of it all, morality versus justice sort of thing, or the law versus justice or morality. That's kind of interesting, that dynamic, that he's just trying to provide for Ridley and he loves her a lot and that's why he's going through all this bullshit. You can tell he's not even that big on it. And their strained relationship, and she finally understands why her dad is like this, and they sort of come to understand each other more and more throughout the movie, and it's kind of touching until the end of the movie ruined it, which I'll get to in a little bit. But let's get to Shepard, Will Poulter's character. So he was a drug addict. He's now a recovering drug addict. Now he's relapsed, and he takes the unicorn dust, like he starts, grating up or grinding the unicorn horn, and he snorts it, he smokes it, he boils it and injects it at one point, I think. But that was maybe one of the funniest parts of the movie, is just him going ape shit, and he, by smoking it all or snorting it, he comes to understand the unicorns, and he has that connection that Ridley has. I thought that was an interesting point, and like another way that you can connect with the unicorn horn. And again, that's like the touching on the lore or the magical powers of the unicorns themselves with this movie, which this movie just doesn't seem that interested in doing. And again, there's this whole thing with like the tapestry that we could get into the lore of the unicorns in a little bit more of a streamlined and focused way. She found Ridley all of these tapestries that her mother showed them when they went to this museum or something like that, and it was all about these unicorn tapestries. So it's like this proven history, and that's why she's an art history major or something like that. And I liked all that stuff. Ridley is so hyper focused on this stuff because it's almost like a sign from her mom that this is meant to be studied and understood. It gets a little aggravating in the movie, and this goes into the writing where all this stuff is happening and Ridley is about to explain a perfectly logical and clear explanation based on all of the previous understandings, and she even says, oh, well, maybe we have all this stuff wrong because none of us thought unicorns are real, but people used to think they were real, so what they said about it has to be the truth. And it's like, yeah, that's actually logical, that makes sense, you should listen to what people said before. But then they immediately shut her down and they're like, oh, no, get this silly stuff out of here, this can't all be true. Or after like 2 sentences when she's explaining something and she says like, oh, we have to give the unicorns back, then they disprove her and be like, oh no, you're being silly or whatever. You would think at some point these people would come to their senses, but they're so attached to wealth that they can't let the one unicorn go even though they have its blood or whatever. I understand the logic of that they're such greedy people they wouldn't let it go, but it's so frustrating to watch to a point where it's not enjoyable because it just seems really far-fetched, or it's just an odd choice in writing, and how it plays out in the tempo of the story feels a little at odds with what's happening. That in one moment everyone's interested to understand the unicorns from Ridley, and then in the next moment they're like, oh, Ridley, you're just a child, we don't have to listen to you. It's like, she's the only one that's researched this stuff, just listen to her. Held all the Griff Butler stuff from the non-spoiler section, but Anthony Carrigan, NoHo Hank, playing Griff the Butler, kind of a useless guy. Like, he opens the gates and just makes a run for it and brings the cops to the house the next day, but he doesn't help prove Ridley or Elliot like, oh no, there was this big unicorn thing and people had to do what they had to do. He just follows them in a car and he's not at all like helpful. The movie is trying to frame him as this guy that's treated poorly by this rich family because he's their butler, and it does a great job of that, and you're really like, oh, what's this Griff guy's deal? And you feel bad for him for most of the movie. And then by the end of the movie, and this goes into that whole ending, it's just it undoes all of its good work. It's like, oh, why the hell do I care now? He seems like he doesn't give a shit about them being free, and they tried to stick up for him when there's this point where they're like, oh, we need to open the gate manually because the power turns off because of the unicorns. And the 2 rich people, Belinda and Shepard, as well as the doctor, all volunteer him because, oh, well, if anyone know how to open the gate, it'd be the butler. And Ridley and Elliot both sort of abstain, or Ridley sticks up for him, but Elliot sort of abstains. And it's like, those people tried to put their neck out on the line for you, and Griff doesn't feel like he's trying to return the favor ever. He's constantly doing these nice actions throughout the movie. They repay him by sticking up for him in a moment of need, even if they lose in that moment. But it's such strange writing. I don't understand it at all. And this movie just feels so at odds with itself. And that again goes like scene to scene. Character motivations are changing, or just people's personalities, the fabric of themselves is just completely different from scene to scene. And it really was hard to get a footing with this movie, and it just feels very like a weird pattern to the story. And in the end, Griff just lets them get arrested. So I want to get into the ending specifically because it is one of the most odd endings, one of the oddest endings I have seen in a movie in a long time. So they get arrested by the RCMP, Ridley and Elliot. They get put in the back of the cop car. We have this really touching moment because the movie opens with them landing in Canada. Ridley puts her head on her dad's shoulder, not purposefully. She falls asleep and just happens to lean on her dad's shoulder. And you can tell, like, he's like, finally, my daughter's back. And I feel like we don't have this anymore. And it's a really touching thing. And I was ready to be emotionally invested. And then at the end of the movie, we see that return in the cop car. She purposefully, while they're both fully awake, she puts her head on his shoulder. And it's like, oh, maybe she did mean it at the start of the movie. And she really did love her dad this whole time. And she understood him. And, you know, as fractured as the relationship was, she still really loved him. But then all of the unicorns just start running up on them and knock their car over into the water so they can escape as fugitives. And it was the weirdest ending because I felt like, oh, we're hitting a really emotional beat here that I'm enjoying a lot of. Yeah, they might go to jail or whatever happens from here. At least their love for each other is back. You know, family is family. And like Griff is behind them in the car following them looking like an asshole. And I'm like, what? Griff was the good guy this whole time. And now he seems like such a scumbag following them to the station. It just wasn't really clear what he was going to do following them to the station as a witness. Like, is he going to blame everything on them and try to get away? Is he going to help them? But I was sort of ready to accept whatever the fate was of like, yeah, maybe they go to jail. Who knows? But at least we had this touching moment. And at the end of the day, family's all that matters, you know? But then the unicorns start running up on them and the cop can't believe it. Like, wow, that was so strange. It felt like it was all a dream moment where the rug's pulled out from under us. And it was just so strange. But I don't know. This movie just had a lot of weird moments that I was sort of scratching my head at. Who wrote that? That doesn't go with the rest of the movie at all. Like the character moments, everyone is so skin deep and just not complex. There's no signs of humanity in our rich people that we could ever explore. There's never a moment where like Shepard, maybe he is a good guy and he's different from his parents. It's like, no, he's rich as well. He's just a scumbag. All the rich people are just caricatures. Whatever. You're making a satire, but it doesn't feel like there's anything with actual weight in the satire because our world is so ridiculous, as I said. But I feel like if they had just ended with them driving away in the car and it's like, okay, whatever, maybe this would be a 2.5-star film. But the ending really pissed me off and I was like, nah, you lost the half star. But I think that does it for spoilers. I don't really have anything else to share. Like everybody dies except Ridley, Elliot, the unicorns, and Griff. I mean, the whole end sequence where the unicorns heal Elliot was kind of fun. It was like, oh, I love this unicorn power. Like unicorns are kind of sick. Again, unicorns are cool. And I wish we got more of the lore in this story and like them scientifically trying to understand the unicorns, but we never get to that. So it's another Opus type movie where we have this like, oh, this fun theme of things that we can explore. And it's kind of a sci-fi-ish science adventure film or a horror film, but it just doesn't really feel that interested in exploring anything. That's it for Death of a Unicorn. Let's move into what else I watched. All right, what else I watched? Well, I have about 5 movies, 3 TV shows, and 2 books to talk about. I finally finished Iron Man, Mask in the Iron Man, as you would know from my social medias last weekend. Really cool. My first Iron Man book that I've read. It's funny. It's interesting to see really how accurate the MCU Iron Man is in some ways. Like, Robert Downey Jr. really is just comic accurate. Iron Man, Tony Stark come to life. It's terrifying. But then I read Secret Invasion after. That's what I'm reading right now. I think I have 2 issues left in that book. I'm sort of shocked the MCU didn't go down the Secret Invasion route after Endgame. Like, I think that's a way better thing to do than the multiverse stuff because you can have all these heroes and deception and like different projects sort of pulling in the Skrulls and stuff like that. They only did it loosely and like in a really bad way in Secret Invasion, the TV show, or Secret whatever. Yeah, Secret Invasion. So kind of a bummer, but I have to say the comic of Secret Invasion, I'm enjoying it so far. Like, it actually has a lot of cool deception and stuff like that, but we'll see in the end how I feel about it. But let's move into TV shows. Okay, starting with The White Lotus. If you don't want to hear anything about The White Lotus, skip ahead like 2 minutes to when I'm talking about Survivor. So, episode 6, Denials of season 3. We finally, oh god, we got the incest moment and it was painful to watch. Chloe saying to Saxon, well, I didn't force your brother to jerk you off. I don't know the last time I had a reaction to my television like that of just my jaw dropping. Probably Roman's dick pics to his own father in Succession. It was that level of a moment of TV, but I just think season 3 is so good and my girlfriend's catching up on it right now. So before dinner the other night, we were watching, I think it was like episode 3 or 4, and I'm already wanting to go back and restart the show because it's just so good. Like, The White Lotus is just so entertaining and every storyline is captivating to me. I love the Ratliff family. I love Rick and Chelsea. I love our messy ladies with Lori story. Jacqueline and Kate, like, it's just every aspect is crazy. Mook and Guy Talk, Belinda and Ponchai. It's just like every element of this season is written so well, and I'm so fascinated in every storyline that it feels like I'm watching 5 shows at once, and I'm so fascinated to see how they're going to pull it off in the last 2 episodes. But Survivor 48, episode 5, Masterclass in Deception, a very historical episode. We see Jeff cry for the first time on Survivor. Ava at the challenge has an episode after she was struggling to win in the challenge or finish the challenge, but then she pulls it out of the bag for her tribe to get second place. She starts having a bit of overstimulation like an episode, and also like all of her tribe mates are just touching her and patting her, and it's just like, it's way too much. I could totally see in that moment that is too much, and that is what you wouldn't want to do. But of course none of them know she's autistic except Joe. So oh man, it was a lot. And I could be like, oh yeah, even if you didn't have the trailer last week showing that she's gonna have an episode at the challenge, like you could feel it coming. She was getting so flustered, and I just felt really bad for her. It is a bit of a double-edged sword, this episode, and this really beautiful moment, because of course this is a thing that transcends the game, but also, like Tyson said on his podcast, one of my friends said, we were texting today about Survivor, how do Eva and Joe bounce back from that? Because it's so clear that they're very tight, that the merge is next week. I don't think either of them are going to not have a target on their back. Specifically Joe. I think he is a fantastic human. He's such an interesting guy, and he seems like he really wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's such an honorable person, but he is just far too loyal for Survivor. There's no way you're winning a game of Survivor with a loyal game like his. I think people want to get him out because no one wants to sit with him in the final 3. You would get your butt handed to you if he's there at the final 3, but at the same time, he's awful at strategy. He has not done anything so far in the game that I'm like, oh, interesting strategy. He got bamboozled by Camilla and Kyle, who again had another good episode this week of continuing to put on the front that they are not close to each other, even after an Oscar-worthy performance last week. But let's get to the vote this week, because Bianca, who I actually DM'd with about Catan this week on Instagram, she seems really cool, but she didn't have a vote, and she went pretty much the whole day not telling people that she didn't have a vote, and she could have forced a 2-2 deadlock where she would have been safe, because you can only, in a deadlock situation, once it's a tie, on the revote, you can only vote for people who have received a vote. So it would have been 2-2 between Say and Chrissy, I believe. So in that situation, she should have just kept her mouth shut probably, and she would have been fine. But the issue is, I think if you're going to tell people, I don't have a vote, you don't, first of all, you don't tell Cedric, because as Justin tweeted this week, he's a terrible liar. Also, I think Cedric's just a really bad player. He's not strategic. He's not good in the challenges. He is genuinely a terrible Survivor player. Seems like a very nice man, but he's not good at this game. She tells him like probably 5 minutes before they're going to tribal council. And it was actually interesting to hear Tyson and Carolyn talked about on the podcast that the producers will yell lockdown, and that's when no one can talk and you have to get ready for tribal council. But most people still do talk and like give each other glares, is what Tyson said. But most new players are too scared to. But also there is another aspect of that. When they're about to go to tribal council, sometimes everyone else will be like running around trying to talk to each other, and then they'll pull someone for confessionals and they're gone for like half an hour and an hour. So maybe Chrissy was in a confessional and Bianca couldn't tell her and didn't want to tell Mitch without Chrissy there, so she told Cedric, or Say wasn't there, so she told Cedric or something like that. But it was just kind of a bit of a mess, and she tells Cedric immediately must have told Chrissy and said, hey, like, she doesn't have a vote, let's just get her out, because Say wasn't there, so she couldn't be involved in the vote, and lockdown probably happened. Bianca ended up going home. She was going home in tears. She was very emotional, which I appreciate that way more. Being passionate when you're voted out is way more interesting than these people being like, oh, give me a hug. Like, Thomas was a great player, and I think he has a lot more Survivor in him if he did ever come back. But I hate when they're like, oh, Jeff, can I have a hug? Or, oh, come on, guys, good game. Like, no, be a sore loser. Who gives a shit? Like, if I got voted out, I would immediately, if I knew that someone had an idol, I would be like, that guy has an idol. But then again, it's easier to talk when you're from your couch. But it was still another really great emotional episode that I enjoyed a lot. Then Daredevil Born Again, episode 5 and 6. Episode 5 was a remaining episode from before they did the creative overhaul of the show. So it's just Charlie. It's just Matt Murdock going into a bank on St. Patrick's Day, and Miss Marvel, her dad is there. He's the bank assistant manager. So it felt like a bottle episode within the context of this new series, but it was in fact a leftover episode from the original creative vision for the show that they just decided not to rewrite and they thought was good enough to keep in. I enjoyed it a lot. Some people probably felt like, oh, this is really weird that we're having a filler episode, but I actually really liked it. And then episode 6 was like a return to the regular storyline with Muse. Daredevil Born Again is just really good. But let's get into movies. All right, couple classics and some new ones. School of Rock. I got it on Blu-ray, so we watched it last weekend. School of Rock is a movie that as a child we would watch probably once or twice a month. I loved School of Rock. I love everything about the movie, and even watching it as an adult, it's actually such a positive movie to watch. Dewey Finn would genuinely be such a good teacher, and I like that he ends up being a music teacher at the end of the movie. Like, he does such a good job teaching kids, don't care what other people think and chase your dreams, don't give in to the man, you know? Like, it's actually just such a positive movie. And it's funny because when you watch back these young adult movies or whatever you would call this, like a family oriented movie, I guess, like School of Rock, or even all the High School Musical movies, which we watched recently and I hadn't seen since I was a child, or I had only seen 1 and 2 but not 3. I love the High School Musical movies because they're genuinely just good examples of masculinity, and like Troy Bolton being like, nah, do musicals, who cares, I can still be a baller basketball player. Same thing with School of Rock. Like, Dewey Finn doesn't care what people think of him, that he's overweight, and he like celebrates everything about himself, and he's just so unapologetic the whole movie. School of Rock rocks. I gave it 4 stars. Then we watched Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Upon rewatch, I loved this movie as a child. I was 12 years old. When I was a kid, here's a little story. I put it in my Letterboxd review, but I had really bad anxiety about the world ending in 2012. From about 2009 or 2010, I had really bad like panic attacks anytime someone would mention the apocalypse or the world ending or like people dying in general. I had really bad anxiety for like 3 years worrying about the world ending. And I remember sitting in the theater with my mom watching Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and the Swedish nuclear physicist or whatever is talking about the world ending, and I remember my heart racing. I was so scared. I wanted to leave the movie, but I stayed. I watched it. I loved it. Is the Burj Khalifa the best Mission Impossible stunt? Maybe, but I think the helicopter stuff in Fallout is also just really good. It's not a perfect story. I think the villains aren't that interesting, and I don't like how much Brad Bird kind of pushes away from the traditional Mission Impossible stuff, like the masks or whatever it is, and Ethan Hunt using the mask. But it's a fun story. Third act is a bit of a mess, but it's still good. 4 stars. Then here we go. All new watches, things I haven't watched before. I watched the Sadie Sink musical on Disney Plus. I think it's a Hulu original called Odessa. Bad. It was really bad. It's boring. The songs are not good, and I don't know. It's just not good acting. Terrible chemistry. It was a musical that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. It was kind of a waste of time. I gave it 2 stars. I want to move on because I got 2 movies I want to talk about more in depth. The Beekeeper and A Working Man. I watched The Beekeeper before I saw A Working Man last night. The Beekeeper frickin' rocked. It's funny. It has such good action. Jason Statham. I could watch 100 of those movies of him just doing fun, actiony stuff. I think the action in A Working Man is better, but the story in The Beekeeper is way better. The story in A Working Man is just all over the place, and it takes place over multiple days. Like, it takes him fully a week to, get all of his investigation stuff done, or like every day he's just sitting around having tea. Dude, you don't have time to go to bed and sleep at night. Go do your stuff. I don't know. He's going back to his apartment constantly. I would be on the hunt if I was looking for a girl. Versus The Beekeeper, it felt like the story was like a perfect timeline, and Josh Hutcherson, what's his name? From The Hunger Games and Kicking and Screaming, Bridge to Terabithia, all that stuff. He's having so much fun as the villain, whereas the villains in A Working Man are just so generic and boring. Although they have the guy from Ted Lasso season 3 who played the Zlatan Ibrahimovic parody. He was kind of funny in it. I really like the cheesy action movies now. I'm kind of moving into my dad movie era, like Den of Thieves, the first one and the second one. I really liked both of them, and Gerard Butler just doing this sleazeball cop is a lot of fun. But The Beekeeper, I like Jason Statham really just letting loose, and do you think there's something in The Beekeeper with like these call center scams that try to scare old people into giving them money? I think all that is really interesting, and it's a revenge story that I really cared about. I was like, oh, this is cool. Versus A Working Man, it's just a friend's daughter that gets kidnapped, and Michael Pena, he's in that movie, and he's the dad of the daughter that's kidnapped. He gives a terrible performance. Like, his crying is so bad in the movie. I was kind of dying laughing, but it was still a really good action flick, and I think the last 20 minutes of A Working Man are really good, but it's not as good as The Beekeeper. So The Beekeeper from last year, 2024, I gave 3 stars, and A Working Man I gave 2.5 stars. I have a lot of stuff I want to watch in the next week, so look forward to another good What Else I Watched segment in next week's episode. But I think that'll do it for episode 63, Death of a Unicorn. Some mixed feelings, just not a really good movie, but next week will be a lot better. I'll get to what we're going to review in a moment. But as always, please rate and review the show 5 stars on all of your streaming platforms, wherever you get your good podcasts, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Acast. We are, of course, an Acast-produced show. You can leave a comment right underneath the episode on Spotify or leave a review all the way at the bottom on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. If you're on the YouTube channel where I just posted my video ranking the MCU franchises, go check that out. But if you're listening or watching on there, like, comment, subscribe. What did you think of Death of a Unicorn? What's your favorite A24 film in general? I'm actually curious what people would rank like the highest for A24. I don't really know what mine would be, but hit the notification bell so you know when new videos drop and new podcast episodes drop every Monday. If you want to get in touch with us, you can actually email the show, watcherofallthings@gmail.com, or find me on social media. Instagram and Threads are at Watcher of All Things, and the TikTok account is at watcher.of.all.things. My Letterboxd account, which is my personal Letterboxd account, KikiJ70, that's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there, comment on one of my reviews that you found me through the show, and I will follow you back. Let's build a little community. Next week, dread it, run from it, Steve still arrives. We are talking Minecraft, the Minecraft movie. Holy shit, it's gonna be bad. I think it's gonna be a fun one to talk about, but it looks really terrible. I'm actually hoping it's good. I have a little bit of hope in the back of my mind that but what if it's really awesome? That would be cool if it was oh, never mind, they just did a really bad job with the trailers and this movie is really fun. I'm way more hopeful that that's the case than, oh, I hope it's terrible and I just want to shit on it. I want a 5-star Letterboxd movie. But that's next week. That's going to do it for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. All the kind messages on every platform, wherever I hear from you. I appreciate it all. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.